we have to turn our attention to the headlines which are driving markets, and that has to do with President Trump, as well as the primaries and the riots and protests, they are separate, that are taking place across the country. Jessica Smith is in Washington, D.C. with the latest for us. Jessica?
Yeah, Adam, President Trump is threatening to deploy the U.S. military to stop protests on riots across the country. In a Rose Garden speech yesterday, he said that these destructive protests he talked about those protests and threatened lengthy jail times. And he says that mayors need to dominate the streets with the National Guard, or else he would step in. Let's watch a little bit of what he had to say.
Mayors and governors must establish an overwhelming law enforcement presence until the violence has been quelled. If a city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them.
Now, President Trump also called himself an ally of peaceful protesters, but I think it's important to note that just before the speech, there was a peaceful protest near the White House, and DC curfew is set for 7 p.m. right now. And around 6:35, 6:40 or so, law enforcement started moving those protesters out using tear gas. And then come to find out a little bit later, that was so President Trump could walk out of the White House and go stand in front of a church nearby. He held up the Bible. He didn't say much, but he did have that photo op moment in front of the church. The bishop who oversees that church says she was outraged by that. We're also hearing a lot from Democratic lawmakers who say the president tear gassed peaceful protesters in order to have a photo op. We did hear from Vice President Joe Biden. He was speaking this morning, and he did tweet saying he's using the American military against the American people. He, being President Trump, tear gassed peaceful protesters and fired rubber bullets for a photo. For our children, for the very soul of our country, we must defeat him. But I mean it when I say this, we can only do it together. Now, several states and DC are voting today in the presidential primary. Vice President Biden is the presumptive nominee, but it's going to be interesting to see how these states and here in DC, how they handle voting and handle the polls with the pandemic going on. Some states had postponed, some have expanded mail-in ballots. So we'll really be watching to see what states learn, what they do to protect voters at the polls ahead of the general election in November.
Jessica, has the president yet responded, or have we got any indication from the White House that he's going to respond to Biden's speech within the last hour?
No, we haven't yet. I don't know. I've been looking at his Twitter here, so we'll keep an eye out if he has anything to say, but we haven't heard about an official response at this point. But I wouldn't be surprised if we heard from the president here sometime soon.
All right, Jessica Smith joining us from Washington, D.C.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.